Okay, let's go ahead and call this meeting to order. Roll call, please.
Carr.
Here.
Daniels.
Here.
Ross. Gaylord. Rivera.
Here.
Hanson.
Here.
Harris.
Here.
Kennedy.
Lee,
Here.
Natoli, Peters, Cerna,
Here.
Terry.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. So with that, we'll move on to the Pledge of Allegiance. And since we have Mr. Corliss in the room, if he would lead us.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I do not believe we have any announcements to make. Or I guess we have the television announcement.
Just a
please.
playback statement. This meeting of the Sacramento Metropolitan Air Quality Management District is cablecast live without interruption on Metro Cable 14, the local government affairs channel on Comcast Consolidated Communications and AT&T U-verse cable system. This meeting is being closed captioned and will be webcast at www.sacmetrocable.tv. Today's meeting will be repeated on Sunday, April 29th and Monday, April 30th, 2018 at noon on Channel 14. Members of the audience wishing to address the board should fill out a speaker form located on the table at the back of the chambers and give it to the clerk. Please speak into the microphone when addressing the board and state your name for the record. Also, at this time, please silence your cell phones until the conclusion of today's meeting.
Thank you. And with that, we'll move on to the Air Pollution Control Officer's report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, board members. Thank you for joining us. I have four brief comments to share with you. And as the chair noted, we will have our guest, Mr. Corliss, address the board and share with us some exciting new developments related to clean transportation developments in the region. But let me go ahead and walk through a couple of things that I need to make the board aware of. The first one is something that I know you're well aware of. I've had an opportunity to have a conversation with a few of you individually about this. You should have seen a note from the clerk of the board related to the American Lung Association State of the Air report that comes out every year. I think by now we're all familiar with it. I want to give you my perspective, and if you were tracking the notes from the clerk, you also know that we submitted some comments for the Sacramento Bee to publish the story. And I just want to put some facts on the table and then talk a little bit about the grade. Obviously, we appreciate what American Lung is trying to do. They've been long-standing supporters of air quality for protecting public health, and we certainly appreciate what they do to highlight some of the ongoing challenges that we all have, not only in the Sacramento region, but as you've seen the report throughout the state and the nation for that matter. The report is got two pieces, the objective part and the subjective part. The objective part is the fact that they're looking at data, the same data that you and I have access to, and that's what you have before you. The report highlights two issues, two challenges for the region, short-term pollution and ozone pollution. And as you know, with respect to ozone pollution, we brought a plan to this board a couple of months ago where we do have a vision for how to get to attainment. Obviously, today, we are not in attainment. We are not going to be in attainment for a few years. But the fact that we have an approved state implementation plan to get there, I think it's worth highlighting. With respect to particle pollution, as you can see on the graph as well, we have reached attainment, but as you can see, we're oscillating very close to the line. And as I've mentioned to this board before, getting to attainment is one piece. The other piece that is perhaps more important is staying in attainment. And really, when you look at these two graphs, I mean, that's really illustrative of how and why we need to continue to push for lower and lower emissions in the region. So this is the objective part. This is again, they are looking at the same data we're looking at. The subjective part is the grade. And again, that's for you and others to decide as to whether the progress that we have made, which is undeniable, the progress that is illustrated in these graphs deserves the F that they gave us. Again, that is a subjective part. Clearly, it gets the attention of the media and others, which again is good. We appreciate the fact that it puts an important underline on the work that we all do to try to get clean air in the region. So just wanted to make those comments for you. I know that, as I mentioned initially, all of you have looked into this. So I'll pause for a moment in case you have any questions or comments before I proceed to the next point.
Thank you. I know Vice Chair Guerra had some questions.
Yeah, thank you. I did want to, first of all, thanks for the op-ed that you had done, and I believe it was prior to even this issue coming out. Mm-hmm. When many of us, Board Member Cruz and I and a couple other folks in the air quality team were at Cap to Cap and we met with the EPA, I think the point about the ozone pollution and the conversation about if we're ever going to reach attainments, how contradictory the federal rollbacks on some of these regulations are if we're ever going to actually meet the subjective letter grade of the American Lung Association. But I just wanted to make sure that our board also knew how proactive we have been here on this effort. And the graph shows it itself, I think, the work that the Air Quality Management District has done, but more so bringing to light how the current proposals that are being put on the table put us backwards in actually meeting those ozone attainment, those federal attainment levels. And not to forget that on the particulate side, our wood burning stove program and maintaining that level has made some issues. And this last year, we had some challenges with wood burning stove again, which underscores the education that we want to do on that. But I just want to say thank you for being proactive before even a media story came out about talking about these issues, and not to lose sight of that effort.
Any other questions or comments for this item? Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Moving on, the next topic I want to share with you, and perfect segue, thanks Director Guerra. We need more clean air action, there's no question. We're making a lot of progress, but we're going to need to up our game and do more. And a new idea that has emerged out of the mayor's office in Sacramento is this of the Climate Commission. I'm jumping the gun a little because obviously we don't own this idea. The mayor is going to probably roll something out with a little bit more detail. This is very much work in progress. But the reason for bringing it before you is because I want you to be aware of this. It's an exciting and new initiative, and the way I think about it, and again, is very much work in progress. There's many actors that are going to be part of this, as they should be, because this is a regional strategy. But the way I think about it is really a very important opportunity for all of us working in the region, in the area of not only clean air, but climate change, to get well coordinated. And what the Climate Commission is attempting to do is to provide a forum for that coordination, because when it comes to advancing on clean air and climate, it's all hands on deck. I mean, we know that transportation is a big source of emissions, and Mr. Corliss is going to actually address some of the issues related to transportation emissions, but we know it's not the only source. We need to advance in some of the other sources. And the way you do that regionally is you get a framework like what the Climate Commission is attempting to do to begin to map where are we in terms of our carbon and pollution footprint in the region? And then the key question for all of us is going to be, what can we do about it, right? Obviously, we're going to need to contemplate how to pay for it. But at this point in time, we haven't done the assessment to actually understand where we are today and where we are going in the future. For those of you that are familiar with the state policy, I think of it as a regional scoping plan. is really putting together the framing for some of the various actions, including the actions that this board is taking. As you've heard me talk before, we are accelerating our efforts to invest cap and trade funding to clean up some of our sources. So this is a perfect setting for some of those actions. There's a number of actors that are going to be involved. Like I said, it's being led out of the mayor's office. We've had a couple of meetings, a couple of discussions with the mayor himself. But again, my objective today is just to make you aware of it, so that when you hear about it, if you happen to hear about it before we meet next, at least you have a basic concept of what this is.
We have a question from Director Cerner.
Thank you. So I appreciate the explanation. Can you share any more about what the intended mission would be? Because there are a number of initiatives, I think it's fair to say, that each of our respective jurisdictions have already launched, whether it be adding elements to our general plan or looking at other parallel sustainability and carbon reduction efforts, and different parts of the governance of our areas that are reflecting already interest in carbon reduction and how we're going to do that. So would the first part of this be somewhat reverse engineering a little bit and using this as a kind of an umbrella construct for what we're already doing, and then moving forward, this would be somehow adding value to that?
Great question, and I'm glad that you made reference to the climate action plans. As you pointed out, there's a number of jurisdictions that have already adopted or are working on the climate action plans. What this is doing is actually connecting those dots, right? So it's not supposed to replace any of the planning processes, but really what this is going to allow us to do is, if we put all the actions together from all of our jurisdictions, right? What is the true potential for reaching some of the goals in 2030 and beyond? For example, the city has already committed to its fair share of electrification of transportation relative to the state goal, right? But what does that look like in the other jurisdictions? So the way I think about it is, again, connecting the dots in a more regional approach. And I started by saying this is led out of the mayor's office in Sacramento. But the intent, given the participation of agencies like ours, we are multi-jurisdiction. The intent is not to limit this to just the city of Sacramento. The intent is really to put our heads together to figure out where is the region today, but most importantly, what is the potential for the future, right? Because the benefit for all of us is again, that it'll show us where to leverage the actions and resources that we hope to continue to bring to the region. So that's basically the exercise.
Okay. Thank you.
So we'll keep you posted as we get more information, and obviously we'll bring it back to the board as necessary. The next item is, I just want to give you an FYI. As Director Guerra pointed out, we developed and published an op-ed against some of the federal actions with respect to rolling back some of the Clean Car standards. It got picked up by a number of different entities, and I was invited and did a radio interview subsequent to that publication. So again, I just wanted you to be aware that that is happening. It's certainly good for us to make sure that our voice is being heard, and that we have a role in stating our priorities with respect to some of the counterproductive actions that we're seeing out of the federal EPA. And then the last point I have is really just a point for you, some of you that attended Cap to Cap. As you know, we just got back. Those of us that attended are here, so I think we survived. I want to give you an opportunity to share with the rest of the board and us maybe some of the key takeaways that you took from the program.
So first up, I know there are a handful of folks that were on the air team. I was on a different team, but we've got Director Cruz has some comments.
I have several. First of all, it was rather interesting back there, considering that they really didn't want to commit on a lot of issues, and I think they're all running scared. What was really impressive was the fact that the EPA, and we'll be cautiously optimistic at this point, was going to maintain their funding for us as far as air quality. That was very impressive. And the DERA funding continued as well. I mean, those are two things that are good takeaways for us, and I was really impressed with that.
Vice Chair Guerra?
Yeah, I think that conversation, and I forgot to mention Board Member Frost was also there, along with some of our industrial partners who had those conversations about the need to be able to manage our attainment levels and what impacts they have to our industry if we can't maintain those ozone levels. And so we were saying how we had a good conversation with the EPA on that. I got a chance to go down a little bit early with Board Member Cruz and a couple other folks on SACOG too, and we had an opportunity to look at the Maryland and Baltimore corridor out there, and to see how they've looked at infill and vitalization and different methods of bike share as well to improve kind of their efforts and their congestion efforts, and to create a more walkable community. And I think there are a lot of takeaways there that we can look at in some of our old corridors throughout the entire county and city from our region that could affect better air quality standards. But I think those were the biggest things, and that was I guess I'll use that as my AB 123 report as well, and for any of us that have to do that.
Thank you. Director Frost?
Well, I enjoyed the air quality team this time at Cap to Cap. I felt like we made some inroads in that we had several conversations where we were able to share with our representatives on the Hill some of our unique challenges that we have in this region, and that, give them a sense of when they put out these, requirements for federal attainment, it doesn't really mean the same thing for every region. And so I felt like we our conversations resonated with them, and I was also excited about the fact that we were able to show that we're working creatively to try to think of new technologies and new things, ways that we can work with biomass that are not quite as impactful on our air quality, and that we're really trying to work with the resources we have, but how important it is that you give us the resources in order to meet your goals. And I thought Alberto did a great job in kind of bringing that home in several of the conversations. So it was, as usual, a great to be on the air quality team. Air quality means a lot to me personally. I came to Northern California because my father couldn't live in LA anymore because of the air quality. So I'm here because of air quality. So anyway, it was a great Cap to Cap, a lot of good networking, and we made some great progress on air quality.
And Alberto led a bike share team through the streets of DC to the EPA meeting.
You guys rode bikes to the EPA?
It was cold.
Yeah, I will say that as one of the chairs of a different committee, I can't imagine going to that trip for your first time and also having to chair a meeting. So kudos and hats off. There were a lot of compliments of the work that the air quality team did while we were back there. Any other comments?
The only thing I'd add, Mr. Chair, is that in addition to the comments of my colleagues, is I think that for as much as we're there to face the federal audiences and the other people we interface with, I always think the alchemy of those moments is that we synergize across 300 plus people a regional set of priorities and goals, and to hear people from different industries, public, private, and frankly just different ideologies, all pushing forward with the region's goals, I think is an inspiring moment, especially when it can seem like an uphill battle with DC, to all be there united. And so I think those moments are good for all of us.
Yeah, and to echo that for Mr. Corliss, who I think that SACOG tour embodied that regional conversation of people getting together, and I thought that was time well spent for a lot of folks and on that trip through Maryland. So.
And for anybody that's interested, as we talk about the EPA budget, I'm pretty sure the EPA secretary is testifying right now in front of Senate Appropriations about their budget for this year. So we'll see how wild they are about keeping level funding for air quality. I'm cautiously optimistic that you're right. So with that,
Very good.
anything else?
That's it.
Okay. So with that, we'll move on to the consent calendar. Do we have any public comment on any items?
No, we do not.
Okay, do we have any items that need to be pulled?
I'll move the consent calendar.
Have a motion? Do I have a second?
Second.
A motion by Guerra, a second by Hanson. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition? Abstentions? Okay. So we'll move on to our discussion calendar. Item 6 is Sacramento Area Council of Governments Green Region Initiative. Mr. Corliss?
Good morning.
Good morning.
Pleasure to be here in front of you today. James Corliss, I'm the CEO of the Sacramento Area Council of Governments. Really a pleasure to be here, and I really want to talk about some of the work that we've been doing cooperatively with your staff. Thank you very much. I echo the cap-to-cap accolades. I think that was an excellent trip that we were able to sort of gel across agencies and teams and the entire region. And we really wanted to come and talk to you this morning about this Green Region Plan that our board actually just adopted last month, and that we've been working really closely with your staff, Dr. Ayala and Tim Taylor. I've also got Rafe Porter here from the SACOG staff, so if you have anything great to say about this Green Region Plan, you can direct that to me. Hard questions, Rafe is happy to answer them over there. Okay, so there's really three goals in our minds of really trying to develop a regional plan. When we say Green Region, we're talking about mobility, transportation, and really trying to clean up, reduce emissions, electrify our 6-county transportation fleet. And there's 3 reasons for doing that in our minds. Number 1 is to be a national leader. I believe that we have we've set the foundation here at a state level, but really in the 6-county region, we believe we can be a national leader on going green in transportation. Secondly, I think it's wonderful in terms of Green City and the Electrify America and the VW settlement, what the city of Sacramento is doing. We have the city of Sacramento, West Sacramento, and Davis about to launch what we hope will become the largest electric bike sharing system in North America this year. So we've been taking a lot of strides, but if you think about having an electric car, you can't just have the charging station stop at a city border. We need a regional approach because transportation is regional, and this is what this plan is really trying to do, is to go regional, all 6 counties and 22 cities. And then finally, and maybe most importantly, I think you've probably heard already as a board, we are now under the Air Resources Board has adopted strict greenhouse gas reduction targets for us as a 6-county region. In our upcoming transportation plan, we're going to have to reduce per capita 19% greenhouse gas emissions per capita from mobile sources by 2035. That's a 3% point increase from our last plan. Same target year, we've gone from 16 to 19, but in many ways we actually start even further back. For all kinds of technical details I can explain to you, we're probably starting back around 13% because the price of fuel forecast is lower, so people consume more mobility, and we've got about 6 percentage points to make up. The good news in the ARB's action in March is that they recognize that our region is different. While we and Los Angeles, San Diego, and the Bay Area all have 19% emission targets, per capita emission reduction targets, we made a case to the Air Resources Board that we are different. We don't have the market dynamics and the infill housing market dynamics that the other coastal economies have. The state has taken away the very tools that we relied on, like redevelopment, to make a lot of those kinds of things happen. And so the Air Resources Board said, okay, we recognize that. This is a bit of a different case. And so we think there should be a statewide pilot program in the 6-county region to basically try and test new approaches to reducing greenhouse gas emissions. That's up to us. to go to the state to get money to fund electrification of vehicles and car sharing and walkable infill housing development. But we've basically been given that kind of leeway. I kind of describe it as a sort of a fishing license from the state, and that's actually really good news. We're going to have to put our money on the table here regionally to then go get state dollars to match us. So we believe we're not doing well enough to compete for a lot of the cap and trade funds. We believe that if I look at this at a state level, statewide, we're a great region to invest in, because we're probably going to grow the highest percentage-wise over the next 20 years. That growth can be shaped. We can try and test new ideas and technologies here in this region. And again, that's really what the Green Region Plan is supposed to do. It's supposed to wrap up both our existing, what's on the ground for electrifying the fleets. It's really a budget, if you will, to figure out what would it cost, what would it take to truly go green in the transportation sector, to put our money into this and then try to go get state and federal dollars to match us. So there's 5 kind of buckets in the Green Region Plan that I want to cover. First, residential consumer. This is probably the most visible, and the thing that many of us think about is how do we get and how do we provide incentives to electrify the fleet, to try to make sure we have higher penetration on electric vehicles in the consumer market. And this is a little bit of a forecast here in terms of where we are now with electric vehicles in the region at about 14,000 vehicles, where ARB in the state thinks we're going to be heading in the future, an explosion in hybrids and electric. We need public charging stations. We need charging stations to accommodate that growth. And so the first kind of bucket in the Green Region Plan is really to go big, to go region-wide, so that there are no gaps in coverage on charging, and provide some more of those incentives in the consumer market. Second is in the sharing and car rental and what they call transportation network companies, right? So fleets of cars and vehicles are coming here more and more. With Electrify America, we are hoping to see this year a lot of pilot programs here in the city of Sacramento that will be all electric. There will be residential fleets. There will be fleets of electric vehicles sitting on curb space that we want people to use. We need to make those fleets and make sure those fleets are as green and clean as possible. So we know that's going to happen in the city of Sacramento. But as more of these fleets come in, we're not so sure. This is actually a map of the city of Indianapolis. I worked in my previous job very closely with Indianapolis and the former mayor there, Greg Ballard. And this is a map of a private company that I believe has just gone into Los Angeles as well, into some low-income communities called Blue Indy. This is the brand for Indianapolis. So they have gone big in Indianapolis to get electric car share blanketed across the city of Indianapolis and Marion County. That's an excellent example of, I think, the kind of thing that we could look at going bigger and making a bigger investment in terms of Electrify America, what they're doing here in the city of Sacramento. I will also say I've been here now a year. I remember I landed about a year ago in Sacramento International Airport. I went to the car rental counter, a family in front of me, and they went to rent a car, 5 of them, and the woman said, "Hey, can I upsell you to a large SUV?" And the family said, "No, we don't really want that." And she said, no, really, I think you're going to need a really large vehicle. And they said, no, actually, we'd prefer a more fuel-efficient car. So there was sort of, they'd never been to Sacramento before. That was your welcome mat, right, to the region. Now imagine if, rather than that experience, at the car rental counter, they said, "Welcome to Sacramento, can we get you an electric vehicle?" We have about 10 to choose from, and actually it's cheaper because we have a program that actually writes down the cost of you trying an electric vehicle. And here's a map of all the charging stations in the 6 counties. We'll have no problem ever running out of charge. This is the way we do it here in this region. That is the mindset I think we need to strive towards, and that's, again, an example of what we could be doing in terms of sharing and rental. So third bucket, see our colleagues here from RT, transit vehicles. We are going to have to clean up the transit fleet. The state has given us a 2040 deadline to have zero-emission transit vehicles because of the useful life of a lot of buses and cutaways and shuttles. We need to start now thinking about how we can actually get zero-emission vehicles online so we can replace the pool of about 758 transit vehicles with zero emission. This is not a cheap endeavor. We are including this in our budget in terms of we need help, right? We need to both figure out the funding sources here locally, but we believe we need help from the state and from the feds to make sure that we can clean up our transit fleet. Speaking of fleets, obviously there are a lot of other fleets. These, again, are going to be perhaps some of the lower-hanging fruit or the medium-hanging fruit, if you will. City and county fleets, private fleets. These fleets are a great example of places when it comes time to both change the fleets, we can go to zero emission, but also we could look at regional procurement. So we could look at economies of scale to actually go big on purchasing zero-emission vehicles when it comes to fleets, if we have our kind of regional act together. And then finally, we want to make sure that whatever we do in mobility, and the mobility space is revolutionizing, as you know. Uber and Lyft are just the tip of the iceberg, that we are not creating a system of transportation haves and have-nots. So we really want to make sure that things like electric vehicles, as we know, we're already piloting here in Sacramento, but are going into low-income communities and disadvantaged communities. I was talking to somebody yesterday who's sort of an expert on fuel price forecasts. You know that gas is above $4 a gallon. It's climbing higher. Perhaps we should look at low-income families and workers as some of the prime targets of folks who could really use to not actually have that hit their pocketbooks every week and every month. So the Green Region Plan envisions about 3 pilot projects, much like, again, is happening in some places on the ground through SHRA and others, to go big in disadvantaged communities. So here's my final slide, and just basically a sense of the budget. And I do want to kind of give you a little bit of an idea of what the Green Region Plan means financially. We are trying to wrap up and answer the question regionally, what would it take to basically electrify or make zero emission as much of our transportation fleet and network as possible in the 6 counties. And we want to do that by putting counting our existing efforts on the ground, putting some of our regional funds, perhaps at SACOG, I'll say a bit more about that in a second, in on the table, finding private sector partners and utilities like SMUD and PG&E to also come in and to wrap that up and then go to the state and the feds for basically matching and leverage dollars. That, by the way, will help us get to that 19% target that I mentioned earlier that is going to be really hard for us to get to. And by the way, congratulations to many of you. SB1 competitive grants were announced yesterday. We have US 50, I-5, other grants that were awarded to this region. In fact, we did better than our population share yesterday on those announcements. We have work to do still before the board meeting at CTC. But if we don't hit that 19% target, we get cut off from those state competitive funds. So the 19% target is not just an academic exercise. It's a real exercise in terms of public health, in terms of climate change, but also in terms of real transportation dollars coming to this region. So I just want to close by saying the board adopted the plan last month, the SACOG board. Thank you for the board members that are here and your leadership on this. This coming month, and in fact next Thursday at our Transportation Committee, the board will be considering this summer's regional transportation funding round. We have about $125 million this year that is on the table, and you can see in green here we have sort of a high, medium, low scenario in terms of those funds, and some of them come from federal sources, air quality, CMAQ funds. Staff is recommending to go with a high level of $11.6 million for this next calendar fiscal year. So $11.6 million is the high. That would come through the regional funding round. We'd be working very closely with the Air District and your staff and RAFE to then develop guidelines to put that money on the street for all 6 counties. That is, again, that's going to be taken up by the Transportation Committee and our other committees next week and our full board on May 17th. So that's, again, a little bit about this Green Region Plan. We feel very strongly that we need a regional, multi-city, multi-county, public-private effort on this. We have to go all in. We think this is truly exciting. Really been great to work with your staff, and would love to take any kind of questions or comments. And thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much. Questions from board members? Comments? I think it was great information. Thank
Stunned you all into silence.
No. It's like drinking from a fire hose sometimes, though. right. Thank you.
Thanks.
Maybe as a way of transition, I just want to acknowledge that it's been great to work with both SACOG and our partners at Sacramento RT. I think we're really developing a critical mass of actors in the region that, as you can see, we're trying to make things happen in a good way for the region. So it's been great to have them part of our process.
Thank you. So moving on to item 7, community toxics from wood smoke study result.
Good morning, Chair Terry and members of the board. My name is Janice Lamb-Snyder, and I am the program manager for the air monitoring, planning, and data analysis sections. Today, I'm going to be talking about our results from our community toxics from wood smoke study. And just to give you a little bit of a background of how this all started, back in 2015, the district applied for a community toxics grant. And we received this grant to perform the study. And with that, we assembled a team to do the study in the winter of 2016-2017. Here is a list of the team who assembled and implemented the study. I have Sonoma Technology here, who is the contractor that we contracted to perform the air monitoring, as well as the data analysis and final report preparation. We also have various labs and contractors that also perform the phone surveys, as well as EPA and Air Resources Board, as well as South Coast, to give us ideas and on our study design. What I don't have listed on here are the 13 community participants that we had host our air monitoring sites. And without those participants, we would not be able to implement this study. And I'd like to recognize Director Carr for also being a participant in the study, and all of these community members graciously welcomed us into their backyards to do this study for a period of 2 months. So why are we studying toxics from wood smoke? Wood smoke makes up about 60% of the PM2.5 emissions inventory in Sacramento County on an average winter day. And PM is linked to many adverse health effects, such as decreased lung function, aggravated asthma, non-fatal heart attacks, and early death. And so we really want, as a district, really want to understand, what are the health impacts to our communities and what are their exposures? Again, this is really to gain a better understanding of the type of sources that our communities are exposed to, and to also pair the data with burning behavior. Does it match up? And so we really dived into that in this particular study, and we looked at particularly EJ and non-EJ communities in Sacramento. So what questions did this study answer for our communities? First, what are the concentrations of air toxics? And to what degree does these toxics contribute from wood smoke versus traffic? What are some of the communities disproportionately impacted than others? And if there is, are there outreach efforts that could reduce toxics from this wood smoke exposure? So a little bit about how the communities were selected. We had monitoring in six communities in Sacramento, and each of these 6 communities represented 3 particular pairs. So we had one EJ community paired with a non-EJ community. And to determine the locations, we actually met with lots of community leaders and stakeholders to determine what areas were important for them for us to measure these concentrations at. And of course, we had scientific considerations such as, what was the meteorology, terrain, all of those matching. For the study measurements, we had 12-hour gaseous samples, and those were to characterize the air toxics that were in the communities. We had nighttime versus daytime samples, as well as wood smoke particle filters. We sampled those on 14 days throughout the winter of 2016-2017. We also had 1-hour continuous measurements of PM 2.5 that were from regulatory grade monitors as well as low-cost sensors. We also looked at black carbon, which can help us distinguish the traffic versus wood smoke components. And one particularly interesting thing about this study was that we did a phone survey in those communities to characterize what the wood burning behavior are in those communities. So we were able to match the phone surveys with the ambient data. This is a map of the different monitoring stations that we had in Sacramento for this particular study. There are 2 monitoring sites that we currently have that the district operates that we started from. The Del Paso Manor, where you have a star, and at T Street, which is ran by the Air Resources Board. We use those 2 as our starting points because those were where our non-EJ areas were. And so then our next step was to find out where the EJ areas are that could match up with those particular sites so we can leverage our existing resources. So we paired up Del Paso Manor with the Arden community and the T Street area, which is the downtown area, with South Natomas. And if you can remember, the board also directed us to look at areas that were south of 50. And so we had Tahoe Park, Colonial Heights as part of our non-EJ community, and in South Sacramento, which it represents our EJ communities. So, summary of the results from this study. What we found was that wood smoke from wood burning does not significantly contribute to air toxics concentrations, and that fossil fuel combustions was the highest in our EJ communities, but wood burning indicators were the highest in our non-EJ communities. And the phone surveys and the ambient data all showed a consistent story, that there was more wood burning in non-EJ areas. One last thing that we had on there was that what we found was that low-cost sensors actually performed pretty well during the study, and that although there were modest variations in each of the communities, we were able to use them to assess spatially, or increase spatially our monitoring in the county.
Mr. Chair, can I just ask a question just
Yes.
on the low cost sensors? So is that as a part of the study? So is that a trend we're going to use low cost sensors in the future? Do they have their for other types of testing rather than have the investment of change out for hundreds of thousands of dollars? Do you think that we can deploy those in other situations?
I think what we could do is that we can supplement our regulatory analyzers. I don't think it will be a replacement. I don't think the technology is there yet for all the different pollutants that we are measuring for. Low-cost sensors right now have shown that PM is relatively pretty good, but things like or pollutants such as like toxics are not there yet. So.
Okay. And just one other question, because you had pictures of them in the study, showed they're on the ground and so forth. They're fairly low to the ground. So can you deploy low-cost sensors in higher elevations? Because T Street isn't that up above ground in the building, and I don't know about Del Paso Manor, but some of those are 2 or 3, maybe more stories in the air. So is there a variation depending upon the elevation at which you deployed low-cost sensor, or no?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I think we're able to deploy these on roofs. I mean, some of them, are probably this big, and then some of them that we have in the study was about this big. And so it's more about whether or not we can get power to these low-cost sensors and, locating them where there isn't any flow obstructions.
So is there, but there is a lesson learned out of this as results of the study that, again, those devices have a very high degree of reliability and may be able to be used in other efforts that this district and other districts, I guess, put forth. So.
Actually, there's fortuitously, obviously when the agency started this project, we didn't know about AB 617, but fortuitously, this is becoming a very important piece of information for some of the future actions that we're going to be expected to undertake as part of AB 617. And one of the key features in this new mandate is the fact that we are expected to saturate our communities with some of these technologies so that we can better understand the very localized impacts of remaining emissions. So absolutely, again, it's fortuitous that we did this study, but for us, it's going to be a very important piece of information as we proceed with our plans for community monitoring under AB 617, as we discussed before the board last month.
And if I may just add just real quickly, as Janice already indicated, they did a very good job, especially on a relative scale and low-cost sensor to low-cost sensor. But more to your point, Director Natoli, to the extent that how they compare to the regulatory monitors, there is a average of a double-digit difference on the reading. So especially when you're talking about where we're bumping right around the standard of 35, you're talking about something that actually is proportionally, say, 40% off. But in terms of giving the communities a relative scale of what's going on day in and day out, are they running at a nice average level, are they having something increasing on this day or a better decrease, they're excellent in that context, and so they're a very good source to be augmenting our existing system. But as a direct regulatory authority, we wouldn't want it, because the ability to stay or even get in attainment with these low-cost sensors would not be in our best interest whatsoever.
We have a question from Director Carr.
Let me make sure I understand the results here. Fossil fuel combustion was highest in EJ community, and EJ is?
EJ area community was defined by EJ Screen, which is the EPA environmental justice screening tool, and that was the top 25% given with the different
is disadvantaged
indicators.
community for EJ?
Sorry, say.
Shorthand is a disadvantaged community?
Yes.
Okay. So, you know, it really fits with observations. In the disadvantaged communities, you have vehicles that are not well maintained, leaking oil, just older vehicles. Vintage. Vintage, like us. And we don't see a lot of wood-burning fireplaces and things like that. So it tells me that we should be directing our electric vehicle focus on those communities and the outreach to the non-EJ communities to get them to stop burning. So anything that we do towards getting electric vehicles introduced, and especially into apartment complexes where there's a little ability to charge, and to some of the gathering places, the stores, the supermarkets, to have chargers in those community meeting facilities, the better off we're going to be. So hopefully this will guide us in how we focus our funds as we move forward.
We're in full agreement, Director Carr, and the point is well taken. We recognize we owe you and this board a description of some of the new exciting programs we are working on, very much in tune with what you heard from SACOG in terms of getting these better mobility solutions to these disadvantaged communities that we do have. I do anticipate that in the near future we'll be able to bring to the board a quick presentation from the staff to talk about these very issues, but we're in full agreement with you that we're working as hard as we can trying to attract the funding we need to make sure that we get these better mobility solutions, electrified vehicles, car sharing, what have you, into these communities.
And the allocation of resources that SACOG just submitted on that chart, did it follow those recommendations?
So SACOG has got big, broad categories, car sharing, for example. And this is where we come in. We need to continue to work with them to define, once you identify that car sharing is going to be a mobility solution we want to pursue, where do we make it happen? And the reason they're working with us is, again, because we do have a very successful pilot program that is growing because the state has seen the success, and they're going to be adding more money to it. Electrify America is looking at our pilot as an example. So you can see that we begin to leverage not only the funding, but perhaps most importantly, the actual lessons that we're learning. So that is precisely the way that the SACOG Green Region Initiative is supposed to work. And car sharing is just one example. I mean, you can apply the same logic in terms of emphasis on disadvantaged communities to each of the categories, improving transit.
When he presented the chart, it had symbols, and I'm not sure exactly what those symbols stood for. The one on the very bottom I took was car sharing, and that had the least amount of funds dedicated to it. So we can go back and review that.
Yeah,
but it didn't seem to be in alignment with this, the results that we see here.
Thank you. Vice Chair Gare?
Yeah, I wanted to concur with Board Member Carr's comments about the education component in some of the non-EJ communities. And I had when I met with your staff a couple months ago about some of the message boards on social media, both I think it was Facebook and Nextword.com. There was a robust discussion, and from communities who use fireplaces as a novelty. And there was a belief that there wasn't actually regulations on fireplaces, and that there actually wasn't any impacts from using the fireplaces. So, and as we just saw recently from the data points on the particulates, we've been maintaining our up and down right on the edge of our attainment level. So we've been doing a good job, right? And we're not saying people can't use them, but I think it's the awareness of when they can and can't, or and some folks, I know some friends who've converted to the natural gas, but I concur with Board Member Carr over here on getting the education piece out in those communities so that if they want the novelty, let's try to do it in a better way that doesn't have particulate impacts.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Director Harris, want to weigh in?
Thank you, Chair. I also agree with Director Carr and Guerra on both points. We've already shown with our pilot at Alder Grove Marina Vista that electric propulsion actually meets the economic needs of people in disadvantaged communities. So we really need to take this study and press it with Electrify America as they prepare their regional car share program. I think it's very valuable information to share with them because they will have good success in EJ communities. That piece, and I'd also like to speak about the wood burning. It is true, you know, like in my district in East Sac, an awful lot of people have outdoor wood burning fire pits, and they use it as a social event. And there really is an education component here that I think would net results. You know, we put out information about no burn days, and often people disregard it completely. So there's an enforcement component too, but I think there's really a lot of ground to gain on the particulate matter in those non-EJ communities. So I agree with Director Guerra completely on that point.
Thank you. Director Daniels?
Thanks. Well, at the risk of saying I must be missing something, point number one to me clearly says that the smoke from wood burning does not significantly contribute to air toxic concentrations. Am I reading that wrong? We're talking about, it sounds like we're talking about just the opposite in these comments.
And Janice can go into more detail real quick. And the important distinction here is there's the regular particulate matter levels, which are the wood smoke is a significant contributor to. It's just are there or are there not toxics coming off of wood smoke? So you are correct in reading number one that from a toxics perspective, there's not a lot of toxic emissions that come off of wood smoke. PM itself, which we're right on the cusp of attainment, is very much associated with wood smoke. It's just whether or not there's toxics from it.
Okay.
So you are correct though that it is very explicit on the toxics piece.
And to clarify, the PM is causing what to people?
Well,
what is the danger of higher PM?
So higher PM has, if Janice I think is quickly flying back, but it's everything from aggravated asthma, decreased burning or breathing capability, irregular heartbeat, the non-fatal heart attack. So there is very much a PM impact, which is why there's the federal PM standard of 2.5 of the 35 micrograms per cubic meter. So the PM side of it itself has a very direct impact in terms of the health and well-being of our communities. the study itself was trying to break into more of, well, is there also a toxics issue that maybe we're not as aware of from this, and where that significance may or may not lie? And so the point, going back to Janice's slide on the very first point, is that wood smoke is not a significant contributor to toxic emissions from it. And where we are seeing the biggest impact of toxic emissions is from our mobile sources, from our cars, our trucks, our locomotives in the areas as well.
I'll give you a short version of this, just to be clear, make sure that we're all on the same page. PM can kill you, so it's bad for you. And PM is a Trojan horse, because inside it you can have all kinds of nasty stuff that causes you the ailments that you see on the slide.
But earlier in your presentation, didn't you also put a chart up, was that we're at a pretty good level with PM?
Well, to the extent that
where we're allowed to.
Right, yeah. We're oscillating back and forth, and you know, that keeps me up at night. I want to see that level a lot further down from the line, because on any given, I mean, we watch these levels very closely, because on any given episode you can go off into the non-attainment area. So
lightning in Santa Rosa can or house fires in Santa Rosa can drastically affect this, and we have no control over those types of.
And dumpster fires in Washington.
Yes. How about that one? Yeah. Was this a cap-to-cap visit that I didn't hear about?
Okay.
Any other questions for staff on this? Thank you very much.
Okay. So the directors are exactly on point. This is what the recommendations are coming out from the study, is that we need to continue to inform our communities about wood smoke pollution, and how do we continue to motivate behavior change to move that trend line a little bit further down from the health standard. We want to be able to improve outreach to areas where residents are unaware of the program that tend to burn more frequently. And then how do we message and outreach more on specific days when burning occurs? So there are times of day where people tend to burn more, like in the evenings after they get home, or during holidays, Christmas Eve, such things like that. And then we want to identify ways to better inform those who do burn. Last slide here, communication of results. We had 3 workshops communicating these study results. We had one located at the district with our stakeholders. We had one at the Arden area Sacramento Realtors on Howe Avenue, as well as in the South area at the Jose Rizal Community Center on Florin Road. So we're providing our report to the board today. It was posted in February. We will be writing and submitting journal articles for publication to share our knowledge and our experience, and we'll be also doing that, presenting at various air quality conferences, and really sharing our experience with other communities or agencies, especially as we move forward with AB 617. This is really a framework that I think lots of areas can use. And then our full report is available on our website. So if you're interested digging into all the toxics details, it's located on our website. There are 2 people that I want to recognize. We have Steve Brown here from Sonoma Technology. He is the lead program manager and lead scientist that helped put this all together, as well as Stephen DeAndrea, who was our district, one of our district leads for this study.
Thank you.
And that's it. Thank you.
Just one other thing that I kind of anecdotally, my office is right near Alhambra and Broadway, and every day that I drive I come down X Street, right under the highway, and the colder days, and I'm just going to point this out, as if I put my cap-to-cap hat on as chair of the community resources team, which focused on homeless services and housing, as we see more and more homeless individuals out on our streets unsheltered, and we have about a 50% increase in the point in time count last year of these individuals, the number of times I've seen homeless individuals just in that one spot by my office lighting illegal fires, and I know Director Cerna has been working on this a lot at the county level. the number of illegal fires that we're having on these very cold days and how that's going to continue to contribute to this issue. Because if we got every homeowner and every apartment, and well, there's not a lot of fireplaces in apartments, but if we got everyone that's living in a house that has a fireplace to stop doing this, we still have a massive problem and a very dangerous problem, obviously, from wildfires and everything else that can come from that. And again, I have no solution to that answer. I know that Director Cerna has been working on that a lot when it comes to America River and other places like that. But it is something that we will continue to see as housing prices continue to go up and more of our lower income families and individuals are pushed further to the fringes. And ultimately, if it's a cold night and there's nowhere for them to be, this is a problem that we're going to continue to have.
Mr. Chair, the only thing that I'd like to add on this also for the staff, I do see our state advocacy team here, our lobbying team, and if there are conversations in the legislature about air quality efforts or improvements, to see if we can look at any resources, much like we do for the lawn replacement or programs that are non-income based. Right now, our wood burning program assistance is based for low income, but as you can see, that it's not necessarily the low income communities who are doing this. So if the state goes after or looks at programs to incentivize replacements of those wood stoves, that we keep an eye on that. So.
Any other questions for staff on this? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
So our next item is a public hearing on the proposed budget and fee schedules.
Okay, good morning, Chair Terry and directors. My name is Jamil Moons. I'm the Administrative Services Division Manager for the district, and it's my pleasure this morning to present to you the proposed budget, FY 18-19, as well as the fee schedule. Okay, so this morning what I'd like to do is just review the budget development process for the benefit of the board and the public and how we produce this. Talk a little bit about the new financial system, New World, ERP, and the implications on the budget document this year. And of course, the purpose of the budget is to support funds towards our major initiatives and priorities, so I'd like to review those with you. Then we'll dive into the schedules of the proposed budget, talking about some notable changes from the current year into the proposed, as well as taking a look back at some revenue trends and expenditure trends, as well as looking forward at our forecast. Finally, wrapping up with some of the challenges and opportunities that face our district's financial position, and then our proposed fee schedule that is reflected in our revenues. The budget development process, it is an annual process. We do bring a budget forward once a year to the board for consideration and adoption. And that process starts pretty much early in the calendar year in January. We meet as a staff and we look at our needs and requirements and our programs for next year. And then we meet with the subcommittee, the committee of the board, the Budget and Personnel Committee. We did meet with them in February on the 22nd and again in April 9th. And we go over in depth the schedule, the implications, some of our assumptions that go into the budget. And at the April 9th meeting of the committee, they did direct staff to bring the budget forward as you see it now for full board consideration. We are here at the first of two public hearings required for the passage of our budget, and at the end of this presentation we will be asking the board to set the second public hearing for May 24th, as well as providing input and direction for the development of that final budget. Once the final budget is adopted by the board, we then publish that budget, and it is effective as of July 1st. A couple years ago, the board approved us moving forward with the implementation of a new financial system. We went out for a competitive process and we selected a Tyler Technology solution called New World. We are well underway with the development and implementation of that solution. We're very excited about it. It is targeted to go live July 1st and manage all the financial transactions in this approved budget in that system. As part of that, we will be processing our own payables, our own requisitions, all of our financial activity, and therefore transitioning off the county's system in that process. We are excited that this new solution is going to provide much more robust reporting. It has a project and grants module. It's going to be an enhancement to allow us to really dig into the program and project costing of all the different programs we operate and better manage those and better allocate our resources to that, making it much more transparent for the board and the public. Finally, we do expect some improved efficiencies from that. We have several manual processes, including developing the budget process through multiple spreadsheets. Our requisitions are done manually outside of a system. Our purchase orders are done outside. All of that's going to be included in the financial system, and we're looking for a seamless, improved process, including accuracy and reporting from the system. The implications of the new system is that we have a new chart of accounts. And so that new chart of accounts means we have some different numbers. We have some different numbers to our funds. We have some different names to our funds. We also have some different numbers to our accounts, our expense accounts, our revenue accounts. We've tried to make that as seamless as we could for you. We worked with the committee on that process and really got into discussions about how do we crosswalk that so it's seamless to the board. And we think we've done a pretty good job with that, but we do understand there may be some questions about that crosswalk. Two main changes in how we do accounting treatments that I do want to point out that you'll see as part of the budget process this year is we are including a new fund. Historically, we've had 3 funds. We are replicating those 3 funds, albeit with different names, but we are adding a 4th fund, which is a debt service fund. And the purpose of that is just to manage the inflows and outflows of our debt service payment for the Coville building. We issued certificates of participation several years ago. We refinanced those in 2010, and we still have years to pay that off. So it's just an accounting tool that more clearly identifies that and shows the inflows and outflows of that debt service payment. And lastly, transfers. Historically, we've brought in the administrative portion of all of our incentive funding directly into the general fund. And we're changing that practice. We're recognizing the entire grant in our special revenue fund, and then we're going to transfer that money out. When we get into the presentation a little bit, you'll see the implications of that, but I just wanted to point that out. So if you see some increases and decreases as a comparison from last year to this year, the most significant change is the $1.9 million change. It's just in a different bucket, and I'll try to explain how that impacts the budget. We have delivered to you in April a proposed budget. We have already identified a couple things that we want to make changes to, coming to you back in May for the second public hearing. We have not seen any changes in the financials, so the financials and structures are good. So our May revision is not like some May revisions. It's going to be status quo in terms of the budget numbers. However, we are going to look at some formatting. We're going to move our debt service fund description after the general fund. Right now it precedes that. And we are going to include a debt service fund budget that shows that in and out movement. That is not in there. That is an omission, and we're going to include that. As well as we've been working with our auditors, and they have suggested that we can use our general transfer numbers as setting up our new chart of accounts. We're working out and refining some things so we can remove some transfer accounts and just use existing ones. In addition, of course, any input we get from the board today in any direction about any changes to the budget, we will incorporate those. And that is the budget document that will come back to the board at the May hearing. So as you've heard pretty much today, it's been a long meeting, so I'm not going to reiterate. I think the director's report today, as well as the presentation from SACOG, from James Corliss, really talks about what's going on in the community, in the region. We obviously have to work on attainment for our federal and state targets, as well as being a partner to help implement some of these climate goals. How we do that is through our regular permitting, our enforcement and monitoring, as well as being the boots on the ground for implementation of many of these regional transportation and low carbon, zero emission types of programs. In addition, our air monitoring stations are aging, and both for the quality of what you heard in a presentation earlier, of the output of those results of the air monitoring, we need to make sure the equipment and the facilities are up to date, as well as the safety of our staff. Some of our structures are getting to a state that they really aren't safe. So we do have money budgeted in and programmed in to continue replacing and upgrading those air monitoring stations. And finally, continuing in on our investment in our technology, and we're looking at other upgrades and going to the cloud and working with doing benchmarking with other agencies. We're continuing on that path to continue to find efficiencies and greater reporting capabilities. The legislative advocacy effort and our partnering have also been touched on today. So again, major effort that our requirements, our priorities in the region are recognized at a state level, and that those resources do come to the region is another initiative for the upcoming year. So the proposed budget coming up, it does reflect the funds necessary to cover and carry out the priorities and the mission of the district, as I just described. It does assume that all FTE positions are filled. The budget is there for that. However, as I get to the presentation, you'll realize that that is not our intent, is to fill all those positions. We are taking a temporary pause, holding some vacancies, taking a closer look at that, because our budget also does reflect a deficit. Our expenditures are exceeding our revenues. We do have reserves to support that. It's not an emergency, but it is an urgent matter. It is something we want to consider and take a look at. And so we are going to take a pause, reevaluate our programs, reprioritize, and then allocate those resources accordingly. I do want to comment on the new fund structure so that as you look through and analyze the budget, you'll have a better understanding. So Fund 100 formerly was called the operating fund. We're now calling it a more traditionally the general fund, and that is where it records all the in and outs. That's where all of our staff are budgeted, and it does recognize many of our funding streams, such as our permit fees, DMV, Measure A. The 200 fund is the new fund. That's the debt service fund, as I previously described. The 400 fund is what we're calling the proprietary fund. It is a business-like fund, and it handles our Covell building strictly. So it doesn't have any staffing in it, no incentive projects. It just simply manages the building. And lastly, our special revenue funds, previously called the Emission Technology Fund. As we move into different areas and we get different grants from the state and federal programs, those funds are very restricted. They have to be used just for the purpose that they come in. So we track them very specifically in this fund. Here is the proposed budget. We are looking at the current year revenues of $53.5 million, expenditures of $46.1. So we are looking for an approval of an appropriations budget of $46.1 million. As you can see, it does result in a fund balance increase. However, as we dive a little deeper into that, I want to point out that at the general fund level, we are projecting to use or budgeting a $2.4 million use of fund balance in the general fund. Our proprietary or building fund is pretty much of a break even. We're putting $10,000 in the bank. We like that. And lastly, our special revenue funds are increasing, and those are funds that come in, and primarily that reflects the pass-through of incentive dollars into the community over time. And we are recognizing in an amount that's going to go larger coming in this year, and they're multi-year grants, so they're coming in and they're going to be expended out into the future. So we're putting those into fund balance. I want to take a look at the current year's budget compared to next year's budget. This is where I'm talking about the change in accounting treatment reflects a little bit of a different change. The top table on this screen right here on this slide reflects what we are asking for. That is the proposed budget. It does look like there's a decrease in general fund expenditure of $500,000, a little over $500,000, and that is correct. That is what we're asking for. In reality, though, however, I want to focus on the second table. I put oranges and oranges, basically, or apples and apples together. This is a reflection of the administrative fees that are coming in. We used to recognize them up in the operating fund. So our $23 million on the, I think the third column is the place I'm looking at. On the second table, the $23.7 million reflects the administrative portion that used to come in. So what I wanted to do for the board, so it was very transparent in what is happening, is we are actually looking at an increase of $1.3 million in the general fund. So I want to dive into that a little bit more. So on this slide, it talks about, well, what makes up that change? So what makes up that change is employee services. Our employee services budget is going up. That reflects an agreement with our Employees Association COLA of 3.1%, as well as some other costs related to pensions and health care. As I mentioned, we're not expecting to fully expend that. We do anticipate a significant amount of savings in that budget, but that does reflect the all of our FTE fully budgeted, 96 FTE fully funded. The services and supplies are also increasing slightly. That reflects some additional increases in meeting budget for the leadership of the district, and that is going to be offset also by some funding that we get from organizations that have requested our participation. So while it's going up on the expenditure side, we also see an offset on that on the revenue side. And in capital projects, that increase is reflected in a new primarily in a mobile air monitoring station as a result of AB 617. There's a new requirement of about $500,000. We're also seeing that funding coming in. So while we see on the expenditure side going up, we are recognizing the $500,000 in revenue that will offset that increased cost. I do want to point out this item to the board, as we are asking for a change in policy around collaborations. So one of the things we're also doing to really address our deficit, our structural imbalance here, and to try to get that closed, is that we are looking very closely at all of our programs, all of our contracts, internal, external, and one of the things that is very important to the district, and we're going to continue to fund, is our collaborations and our partnerships. However, we are right-sizing these programs, and so we are recommending that we decrease that budget from $193,000 roughly to $145,000 in the upcoming budget. Historically, we've presented a schedule that identifies specific collaborations, specific partnerships, and they ranged from $500 to $15,000. What we're suggesting this year is that it be a single sum of $145,000, that the APCO have the discretion to determine what those sponsorships are and to make those awards throughout the year. This is consistent with our existing purchasing policy, which does allow the APCO to grant up to $25,000 to any entity that furthers the mission of the district. So that's in our existing purchasing policy, and we're just bringing collaborations into that fold. We would like to recommend that.
Really quickly,
yes.
We have a question from Director Hansen.
Jimmy, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I just, because I raised this in committee, I thought I'd raise it for the board while we're talking about this. It's not really a budget item per se, but a policy around how we evaluate collaboration and sponsorship to see what the benefits are, because some things we've been doing for a long time, and I think the board members can see the benefits of them, and other ones we may not. So it'd be helpful to have some way to evaluate those decisions over the long term, and probably just come back with a policy at some point that allows us to move away from collaborations that aren't producing the outcomes that we hoped, while maintaining the ones that we are getting the benefits from that we sort of wanted. So that was it. Thanks.
Yeah,
agreed.
I would echo that. I think when Dr. Ayala was hired shortly after that, I think we even talked about the number of these that were happening without any real policy around.
Right.
And unfortunately, I think some of these turned to you and me talking about them, and that was
right.
The policy was ask me before we were doing, so that's definitely not what we want to be doing, right?
So agreed. We recognize we owe you that, and we're going to bring you back. And again, The relevance of what you're hearing today is that we now have the tools to actually examine these commitments. So we'll come back to you with our proposal.
Thank you. We do have in our appendix of the budget.
Just really quick, we're going to, I think, lose a couple of board members in about 10 minutes.
I will go fast.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, the change in FTE, which is always an important consideration, is net zero change. We're funding one position that's being fully paid for to help with the new air monitoring requirements, as well as taking one down and unfunding it to help with some of the savings, and that was the assistant to the air pollution control officer. Looking at our trend, I'm going to point to the gold line, the third one down, out at year 18-19, and you do see the trending down, and that's what we're trying to correct. We're trying to level it off, and in the long term, actually have it tail upwards. And that's our general fund. This is just in the main point of this slide I want to point out is these are our funding streams, and you can see the different buckets, and as they're going up, that is true. In the primary area they're going up is the fees and licenses, thanks to the board's approval of a fee adjustment, a multi-year fee adjustment that went into effect. In other cases, such as our Measure A and our DMV, which is used across all of our programs, it's a bucket of money, couple pots of money that are used to support multiple programs, including the implementation of some of the emission technologies. Our air monitoring programs is not tracking as fast as some of our expenditures. So our Measure A is tracking, historical tracking of about 4.7%, and DMV of only about 2.5% per year over multiple years. So it's not keeping pace with this slide, which is our expenditure slide. So our cost of operations to implement all these programs is rising. Our average employee services increases on average about 5.5%. The COLA has been an average over the last 3 to 4 years has been just under 2.3%. But as a result of the other costs associated with employee services and growth in staffing to implement these programs, we're having that structural imbalance. Hence the hold on the hiring and reevaluation of how we allocate resources. Finally, looking out into the future here on the numbers, this is a very busy slide. I highlighted the yellow lines for you. These are our projected savings out into the future. The first line is salary savings. We have to that's where the majority of our costs are. We have to bring those down, but it means that programs are going to be affected by that, and that's what we're going to be looking at closely. In addition, our external contracts, we're projecting savings in each of those areas to help correct that downward trend. The second from the bottom line still shows a use of fund balance, so there's additional work to be done to make that a break even or to reverse that to where we're bringing in more revenue than we're expending. So to wrap up, I've already hit on a lot of these. What are the challenges? We have our funding sources aren't keeping pace with our expenditure costs. We implement many grants, most of which do not fully cover their cost. The administrative portion they provide with the grant does not meet the cost, so we have to match it with these limited DMV dollars and Measure A dollars. It's a single pot of money with lots of demands. What are the opportunities? Well, we get to take a good look at this, and we get to figure out, where are we headed? What are the programs that we need to sustain, and how do we allocate those resources accordingly? We need to continue to work hard internally and look at additional efficiencies and implement those. We have to work with our lobbyists and the board and everyone to advocate for the type of administrative percentages to do the work. We're a great arm and boots on the ground to implement these, but we need the funds to do it. And finally, we may need to explore new revenue options. So, sorry, I do have to hit this one. The proposed fee schedule that is before you, it is recommending a CPI adjustment. We use an index that we go to for this purpose. It is showing a 3.0 CPI increase to those fees that allow for that CPI increase in the rules. We are asking that be implemented. That is reflected in the revenues that we are proposing. With that, we recommend that the board open and close the public hearing. Please provide us directions, any input on the proposed budget, and set the hearing for the second public hearing for May 24th.
Thank you. So first I'll open the public hearing. Do we have any public comment on this item? Do you have any comments from the board? Hearing none, I will close the public hearing and entertain a motion.
I will make a motion to schedule the public hearing for is it May 24th?
Yes.
Oh, great. Another birthday budget hearing. But I will make a motion to schedule the budget hearing for May 24th.
Second.
Thank you. I have a motion by Guerra, a second by Hanson. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition? Abstentions? Motion carries. Do we have any public comment?
No, we do not.
Okay. Any board ideas or comments?
I have just a quick one.
Director Harris.
So you've heard me before talk about my EV Air program I'm trying to bring, and I want you to know that the first all-electric aircraft have hit American soil. They're in Fresno, and I'll be going down to view them and fly them. And I've been collecting substantial interest from FBOs, or fixed-based operators around the region. I think that this program is going to have wings, if you will, and I'm going to keep pushing for it.
Thank you. Believe we have one other announcement.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just handed out to my fellow board members a flyer for an event this Saturday. It's an annual event that I extend an invitation to all of our local electeds. At least I try to every year. And this is our annual Department of Human Assistance, Department of Health and Human Services scholarship program. And our band, unsupervised, is providing the entertainment. And we raise between $30,000 and $50,000 each year. And it helps deserving youth in our areas from all your cities and from the county that are going to college, helps them out a bit. And it's very much appreciated by their families and by the students. So again, just want to offer that friendly invitation to everyone.
Thank you. Any other announcements or comments? Okay, with that, we are adjourned.